Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to NPU Live. I'm Keri Rodriguez.
And I'm Tim Langan.
Coming to you live from Boston, where it's been kind of chilly the last couple of days, but it's about to heat up. So we're excited for that.
It's going to be a scorcher.
That's right. So maybe the kids will stop complaining about how cold the driveway pool we've set up.
They'll find something.
Oh my gosh. The gnashing of teeth and the agony, because we bought one of these pools and put it, we live in the city, right? So literally it's in the driveway because we're still working on the lawn.
We're still working on the lawn.
Working on the lawn.
No grass yet.
No
grass yet, but it's coming.
Someday it will be here. Maybe a couple weeks. We'll see. But we have the driveway pool, and it's too cold for our boys.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is the pool being below feet too cold? I'm sorry, my sensitive snowflakes.
Oh my goodness! So there's been a lot of whining, a lot of agony because the pool is so cold. But so I'm really excited about warmer, more temperate weather, so that they can just dunk out their feelings, because that's what
we do.
Secret recipe, folks. Like I'm gonna be revealing a little mommy advice myself before we talk to Mira Brown, and get some information and tips from prepared parents. And veteran moms will know this. You're going to say, Keri, I already know this, but I got to tell you something. With 5 little boys, I have not seen in our little circle this go wrong yet. When little boys are crabby, little girls too, I would have to assume, although I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. But when little boys are crabby and up in their feelings because they're so bored, and you've said no to Fortnite bucks, and they can't go to the playground, and they don't want to wear a mask, and everything is boring, and they've read every book, and they don't want to play their games, and they don't want to do anything. They've done all the art they can do.
That's right. Drawn everything in the world.
Everything they could possibly draw. When all else fails,
throw them in water. Throw them in the goddamn pool.
Throw them
in the pool.
So if you don't have a pool, and again, we live in the city. It's literally like one of those blow up pools that we got on Amazon. Yeah. Pretty good size.
It's huge.
It's pretty good size. You can fit 5 little boys.
Bigger than any pool I ever had.
That's right.
Just saying.
You can throw them in there, but really any water will work.
Maybe run the tub.
One year, the tub is a great idea. But one year, like we were living in an apartment, me and the 3 guys, and they were particularly just awful, crabby, in their feelings, just beside themselves. And in my back pocket, in mommy's magic closet, because you got, if you're a mom, you got to have a magic closet where you get, when times get desperate, you got to pull something out of there. I had some water balloons, so I sent them out in the yard, where of course they were fighting, or pretending to fight. I don't know the difference between pretending to fight and fighting anymore. It's just all loud and yelling. But anyway, they were busy in the backyard. I filled up the balloons and just threw the water balloons at them because they were so crabby and fighting. And you know what? It worked like a charm.
There you go.
And then they turned the hose on me. So you got to watch out for that.
There you go.
Just saying.
You meant well.
Well, no, I meant well, and it was a good tactic.
That's right. As long as they were united in something.
Is fair play, because then they were united against mommy to soak mommy with the hose.
That's not too bad.
The hose is also great. We'll talk to Mira about her adventures.
You can spray them like you spray cats.
Yeah, water guns, spray bottles. Those are great. Water. I'm telling you, when all else fails and everybody's a crab apple, just get them wet. Hose them down.
That's right.
It's key.
It's a good thing. Also, too, I want to say, I hope all the parents got a good night's sleep. Probably didn't, because if you're like us, you realize that a new Fortnite season came out today. Apparently came out at midnight, but our kids were nice enough to sleep in until 4 o'clock and wake up about that. It was like Christmas.
Yeah, it was like
only
Christmas,
on a Wednesday.
and they were really super excited because they wanted to take a look at the new map and the new battle pass.
Yeah. Ooh.
They
showed us right away.
They did let us sleep until 4:40. Yeah. They checked it out for a little while, and then we're really excited. Tim, oh my gosh, Tim.
It was great.
Yeah, it was very exciting. But so we needed a little bit more concealer than usual today because it wasn't early.
You look great, babe.
It wasn't early.
You look great. You look great.
Anyway, the struggle is real. Lots to get to this morning. Really excited about both of our guests being rejoined by Mira Brown from Prepared Parents in Austin, Texas, and Manikka Bowman, who is our friend from Cambridge. And she is she's a powerhouse. She's on the Cambridge school committee, does incredible work leading really difficult conversations in that community. Which can be, you'd think Cambridge, Massachusetts.
There's a couple of Cambridges, yep.
You got MIT.
Yep.
You'd think if that place was filled with brainiacs,
two different
some of
cities.
the stuff would be a no-brainer, but she is still having to break down a lot of walls and open some eyes to things that folks think they see. So I'm really excited to talk to her. Plus, she's a mama. And I want to see how I want to get some tips from her too. She's like right down the street, girl. What are you doing?
I need all the help I can get.
I'm excited about that to see to peek in on them and see how they're doing as a family. But before we get to all that, let's get the update on
the news. COVID totals as usual. 2.18 million cases now confirmed in the U.S. And as we keep hearing, a record number of cases coming out in some of the states that opened early. Arkansas, our friend Judith there in Arkansas, there's, I believe 1,000 new cases now due to infection in meatpacking factories right now. So they are increasing. And again, the deaths have increased to 119,000 deaths.
And I want to shout out right now, again, we have so many of our affiliated members, like parents that are doing heroic work in their communities. We're talking about meatpacking plants. Arkansas seeing incredible spikes in COVID-19. Of course, the Latino community, as always, as alongside the Black community as well, being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Directly, I'm thinking about Judith Yanez, who actually hosts NPU Live in Espanol for us on Mondays, which, she does an extraordinary job, but she's right in the thick of what's happening down there because, you're seeing these spikes. Folks aren't being able to have the personal protective equipment that they need to keep themselves safe. The poultry plants are still open during hotspots. And of course, politics coming into play instead of keeping folks healthy and safe.
That's right.
And when we're talking about poultry plants, frankly, we know the folks that actually work in poultry plants, and many of our elected officials, unfortunately, don't really care about them.
Nope.
So Judith is organizing to make sure her community is healthy, is safe, is heard, doing heroic work there. And she actually has a fundraiser that has been going on. She's been raising thousands and thousands of dollars just for masks, just to make sure masks are available in the community for the folks that are needing them because they're very hard to come by in Northwest Arkansas. So I'm sure that Judith later today at noontime is going to be talking about her effort and what's happening there. We will go ahead and post the link if you'd like to contribute.
I'm bringing it up right now. I'll post it in the comments and we'll post it again on the NPU page. Right now, she is up to $4,415. She needs $20,000.
Yeah, so let's see what we can do to help support and protect the community in Northwest Arkansas, the COVID-19 crisis response for marginalized communities, their effort down there. Specifically, there's a lot of meat packing happening in that section of the world.
That's right.
And there are families. Those are people that work in those plants and they need help. So proud of Judith and her efforts down there.
That's right.
But I digress.
That's okay. Yes, you do. It's okay. I love it. Protests continue across the country following the murder of George Floyd. But again, in the 20 days since George Floyd was murdered, there have been 120 killings of cops against
killing of Black Americans.
Black Americans by police.
And a stunning trend, and we've got to keep our eye on this, folks. Black Americans being found literally lynched,
right?
And a lot of cover-ups happening. I mean, we're hearing Nehemiah Frank, our delegate from Tulsa, Oklahoma, talking about this too. It's very, I'm watching some of our delegates actually posting on Facebook and having to post saying, in case I'm found lynched on a tree, I was not suicidal. And they're not saying that ironically because this is where we are right now. It is ugly. And the folks that are marching in the streets are fighting literally for their lives. They're putting their lives in jeopardy during COVID-19 because they have to. And we are seeing some changes, but it's not fast enough, and unfortunately this is going to have to continue. And my heart is with all of these folks who are bravely doing this incredible work of organizing, making sure that this stays on the front page. As you and I discussed before, we're very nervous that this is going to fall off the radar. And organizations like ours, organizations like the National Parents Union, Massachusetts Parents United, our 200 affiliated organizations. This is the work we do every day, fighting against systemic racism, fighting for educational opportunity for every single child, regardless of what they look like and where they come from. And so I think for all of us, and the discussion we've been having, with our leadership body has all been around that fear factor, that this is on the front page now, but what happens a month from now, when once again we're left alone beating this drum, as we always do, that systemic racism is killing our children, it's choking our families, it's destroying our communities. This is not getting better. So it's scary.
Well, like I always bring up, it's the protests I'm not hearing about that blow my mind. And that's why I'm worried it's going to fall off the front page. Seattle, where they actually, I believe, went into the governor's office and did a sit-in. I learned about that through social media. They had major protests there, right near us in Arlington, Massachusetts. They've had 500 people a day for, I believe, 18 days. I didn't hear about it till a couple days ago.
Extraordinary efforts happening in Arlington, Massachusetts.
That's right.
And led by students, and we're actually working with them as well to try to make sure they have the speakers and the people that they want, but taking our cues from the kids that are leading this heroic effort. But we mentioned Arlington, Massachusetts. I mean, it's Arlington, Massachusetts, but Arlington, Massachusetts is super white.
Yes.
Super white.
Yes.
So to get 500, well, Arlington Catholic.
I went to high school there, so yeah, it is.
Oh my goodness. But it's, holy crap. To get 500 people in Arlington.
That's right. It's a big deal.
That's a big deal. Anyway.
We talk about change not happening quick enough. President Trump signed an executive order aimed at police reform that many Democrats and many reform advocates believe is really falling short. It's not calling for an outright ban on chokeholds and arrests. It's calling for a recommendation for voluntary compliance. Doesn't really get it done.
This dude, what are you gonna say? This guy is just morally bankrupt, and again, just out of touch with reality. The other piece of this that we're also going to discuss this morning is the fact that he's going to cram 19,000 people into an arena in Tulsa, where Nehemiah is going to be leading the efforts down there. The editor of the Black Wall Street Times, actively trying to be in conversation with the mayor of Tulsa to keep Trump out of Black Wall Street.
Yes.
I mean, the guy is just not connected with reality.
No,
so
he's
he
not.
Thinks this weak tea, police reform that he's signed in is going to cut it, and that is somehow going to quell this incredible uprising and the crying out of communities across this country for justice.
People aren't stopping.
Got another thing coming, dude. So we'll continue to watch that, but our heart's also with Nehemiah, as he prepares to lead his community in Tulsa around what's happening.
Right. You know who is in touch with reality, though?
Who? Mira Brown.
Mira Brown, and
yes,
I need a dose of reality right now.
That's right. Reality. Real talk, parent tips.
And I'm not talking like 4:30 a.m. Fortnite reality. I'm talking like Mira Brown. What time is it?
What time?
10:17 a.m. Eastern reality.
That's right. Which is
a little debatable if I'm really in touch with the reality or I just make up my own reality.
I say yes and nod. It's okay.
Oh my goodness.
You guys were bringing back memories. I grew up in New York City, and you were bringing back memories of the driveway pools. I'm impressed you can fit 5 little boys in there. I for whatever reason I have these vivid memories of 2 of us kids crammed into this these little pools in our driveways.
It's not legal. We're
just surviving, Mira.
Listen, we bought it on Amazon. We filled it up. Frankly, I didn't have a hose outside. There's not a water hookup outside, so I had to hook up this thing so it goes from the kitchen sink out the window. This is we needed water.
You to do what you need to do.
What do you want?
We have 5 little boys. Do I need to say anything else? We had to figure this out, and they cannot go to the pool or the beach. We needed to figure this out stat. So we hooked up, or we had some folks help us.
Yeah, we had some.
We had the old sprinkler, which I guess you guys can't do now because you're doing your grass, but it would just like turn in the circle, and we would just like run through.
Yeah, think of a sprinkler.
Oh man.
Our front yard in New York is, like this, it was like
that's
this.
how big the grass patch is.
I've never had a lawn before or a patch. It's a lawn. So I might have to get a little sprinkler. I've never thought of that. This is all new to me. You're giving me advice. This is great.
The sprinkler.
Manikka is going to be able to like really connect with us and understand the grass patch because she's over there. Maybe she's got a big yard. We literally have like this little patch.
Yep.
It's a mighty patch though, and it's going to have a mighty lawn. And
it's what I had growing up. That's why when I moved to Texas, I was like, there's so much land. Like I don't even know what to. I have no green thumb. I don't even know what to do with like my front yard is bigger than my house in New York, growing up in New York City, like it's kind of, and of course it's like dying from the 96-degree heat. Now.
What I find too when I travel too is like not only is there so much land in other parts of the country, it's very well organized. Boston is built, it was a series of like cow paths, and that's what the streets are today. So they don't make any sense. They're all one ways. It's a hot mess express. There is no
I was getting lost.
Well,
I'm not a cow.
There may be some other reasons for that too, but
anyway.
Yeah, it's Mira, how have you been? How are the boys? How are you doing? You're flying free. School has ended in Austin, and now you are free to be without any kind of Zoom conference calls with kiddos and no worksheets to be done, no instruction from the teacher. How is it going, girl?
It's lovely. I may have overcorrected, and I'm kind of like, do whatever you want. You want extra video games, go for it now. We're doing okay. We had one of those just like blissful summer nights last night. I think it's been the first time. It was like so idyllic. We were just outside our house. The kids and the cousins next door were just playing some, they all had sticks that were magic wands, and they were like in their pretend world, and they were just like playing outside, and my husband and I were just sitting there. It was just like till like 9 o'clock at night, which we never let them do because we're just like, we need to go to bed so we have freedom, but it was like blissful, and I don't know if it will ever happen again, but I want to just like package up, like that one moment of everyone being happy and okay, and I guess just happy. I don't know how to explain, it's what summer nights are supposed to be, and it was as if the whole world around us didn't exist, and I want to just like package it up and like feel that more often, if there is a way to package that up and feel that. And then of course we got back inside and reality hit, and it all went.
Go to bed, and they had too much sugar, and then
and Gabriel was up in the middle of the night with nightmares and fears, and so I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning with you, and then I was like, oh, reality. So it was I needed that. Like I need to figure out how to sort of package that up a little bit and have a little bit more of that for all of us this summer, just because we don't know what next year is going to look like, and I don't know if we're going to be back into sort of the mode that I don't want to feel again with Gabriel and with my kids, of just the butting heads and the tension. And so Ben and I are just trying to figure out, how do we just be?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think our kids are really feeling it too, like needing that release and needing to kind of figure some stuff out. Like Tim's oldest son, Max, was talking the other day, like and starting to talk about some fears he had about, well, what's going to happen at Christmas? What's going to happen at
New Year's? What's going to happen with Halloween? All these things, and it just came up out of nowhere. I'm like, I don't know, buddy.
So different, and he was so sweet but heartbreaking at the same time. He's like, I just want to play with my friends.
Yeah.
Like I just want to go to the park, and we're trying to have a conversation with him to say like, okay, well, how do we modify it? Well, what are the things you're missing from the park that we can recreate?
Right.
Or like, is it the swings? Is like, I'm thinking like that, and he's like, I just miss being with my people, my friends.
Well, it's like you said, Mira, you have these expectations about summer as carefree and and hanging out with your friends, and you have this whole visual that doesn't really pertain to this year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. There's a lot of, there's just a lot of, it was interesting. Save the Children did a poll, and they polled kids, which I haven't seen a lot of poll. There have been a lot of polls, as we know, even our own, right, of parents. And, you know, notably when kids were asked how they're feeling, sort of in this order was worried, anxious, stressed, confused, unhappy, right? Like sort of, and none of them mutually exclusive, but right, they all build on each other, certainly. And that's just, it's a lot of emotions for little human beings.
Yep.
Carry. And that's not to say, I mean, sadly, you know, as we know, outside of even COVID world, kids carry these into the schools, kids, and how do you, how do you, right, like, how do you learn? How do you focus? How do you develop, you know, when you're carrying so many emotions? You know, as adults, we struggle with that. And yet we expect, to your point, our kids, right, to just, and I'm a culprit of that, of just, you know, I sometimes I'm like, Gabriel, you know, and I think he's so old because I compare him next to my 2.5-year-old. I'm like, you're a big boy, just, and I'm like, oh wait, he's 6.5, he's gonna be in 3rd grade, you know, like, so it's a lot for our little human beings. And it felt like a really good time to sort of talk about that again, talk about how, you know, we talked a little bit about this in the spring when things were very raw, right? Where we were all in it, we were sort of going into crisis mode, right? And summer, you know, certainly we're still in it. We're all in it a little bit differently now. You know, it's definitely not the same feeling across the country. We're all in it together, as you can, as you notably said, my state included, here in Texas. And so how do we help our kids handle these emotions? And I wanted to specifically talk about today fear and anxiety, because I think those are two, you know, with COVID-19, to your point, and the unknown and what is next year going to look like, there's so much anxiety for our kids wrapped up in that. You know, kids like routine, and kids like to know what's expected of them. And how do we like that, right? But our kids most especially, and you know, how do we can't answer any of those questions for them. Like we don't know. And then you talk about, you know, the protests and just families and kids out on the street fighting for their dignity to, you know, to be recognized. That's a lot of fear that communities and people are carrying. So, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about those two and jump into those and sort of what we can all do. But first, a little bit about, you know, I want to talk about fear because they're actually interrelated, which I think is really interesting. I think a lot of folks think that they're separate. You know, fear causes anxiety and anxiety causes fear. And so you sort of have to talk about both at the same time. You know, fear is a response to a known or threat, right? A threat, and our bodies have fight or flight for a reason, right? That's what keeps us safe. Anxiety is what you feel when you're anticipating that threat, right? So like a really maybe easy example of this is, you know, I remember as a kid, we had a basement, New York City, we had a basement. It was always dark. And I had a fear of all the noises down in the basement. But I got a lot of anxiety when the door would open because I could anticipate, right? That, so like those two things are interconnected. And I think it's really important for us to remember that our kids deal with both. There's like real fears that they have, and there's the anxieties that they feel consistently as they're anticipating that fear. And you kind of have to address both when working with your kids. And so what do we do, right? What do we actually do practically every single day? And I think part of it is that I say manage our fears, because a lot of times I think as parents, we want to sort of come to the rescue, right? In many ways. But the truth is, our kids have to actually learn how to manage, right? How to self-regulate, how to deal with stress, how to build resilience, because those are literally 3 of the most important power habits that they're going to take with them and going to help them be successful in school, and in life, quite frankly. And if we can teach our kids that really early, that's huge. It's huge for them. And so what does that look like? Well, for one, it's actually acknowledging it. And I'll say this one lightly. I know that sounds so simple, but I know I tend to have a response of, don't be afraid of X, or, don't worry about, right? And thinking that, oh, that will just if I just tell Gabriel not to be scared of whatever is keeping him up at night, in the moment, but that's actually the worst thing that I could possibly do, because it doesn't actually acknowledge it. He then feels guilty and kind of bad about it, right? Versus it being it's a very real feeling he's having. And 3, it doesn't actually help him know how to handle that. And so he's just going to keep crawling into bed with me at 4:00 in the morning, because he doesn't actually know what to do with all of those feelings. And so that's sort of the first thing, is just don't do what I do, which is say, don't be afraid of, don't fear this, don't feel anxious. That's not scary, or whatever sort of that fear and anxiety might be coming from. The next thing is to actually give them strategies. And so we've shared this before, and I think it's really helpful. There is something from Turnaround from Children, which is, you can't really see my paper, sorry, I could have shared my screen instead. And they're a phenomenal education organization with phenomenal research on habits and all these things. And they have an emotional response plan. And you can sit down, I don't know if you guys can see this, with your kids. And you can just help them. When I feel whatever that feeling might be, I can, right? And you talk through them the different ways that they can respond to that emotion, right? And you can do this with fear, anxiety, whatever that big emotion might be. And then sort of check back on it, right? Consistently over and over again. Like, hey, buddy, when we said that you are scared in the middle of the night, or you're feeling X, here's something that you can do.
Right.
And an example of that also could be, sort of taking one thing that they say is helping your kids learn how to take the opposite action, right? So in the moment, right, if you tell someone's feeling sad and they want to sort of isolate or whatever it might be, making yourself talk to someone, right, is taking the opposite action. Because what that does is that starts to sort of train your brain and train yourself to sort of overcome an emotion in a really positive way. And we all know, right, in that case, sometimes you have to just force yourself to do it when you just want to hole up, for example, or whatever, and so there are multiple things. I have found Turnaround for Children's emotional response plan and all their strategies super helpful, really practical. So that's something else we can do. And then the last thing I would say, and there's a lot more in the actual tip, is ask questions. I make a lot of assumptions that Gabriel knows what he's actually afraid of, or what he's feeling, what that anxiety is actually coming from. And based on those assumptions, I say and I do things that are not helpful, quite frankly.
You do it. You ask. You always ask if you're having big feelings.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so I used to do this really badly because I didn't have a great example. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just like you, Mira. I would say, stop. For instance, I'm going to give you a perfect example. So my oldest son, Matthew, who has some special needs and is autistic as well, he has a fear of bees and buzzing. And anytime he hears buzzing at all or loud noises, he's got sensory processing issue. It's a real fear. So what I had to learn was exactly this. So, and it actually applies for my children who don't have the same. What I try to do is stop, because telling somebody not to feel their feelings does not work. It doesn't work with me, and I'm 41 years old.
And it makes me mad when someone tells me that, right? I get angry when someone's like, don't feel that way. I'm like, who are you to tell me not to feel a certain way?
Okay, honey, calm down.
Yeah.
Chillax.
Yeah, just breathe.
I will not be calm.
Take a breath.
Oh, you want me to calm down? I'm going to show you.
Exactly. It spins you up, right? So why would we expect anything less of our children? Yeah.
So our little people do the same thing. So what I've learned and I try to do is see them. What I say is, I see you're having some big feelings right now. And with Matthew in particular, with the bees, we already know, and me telling him not to be afraid and rationalizing why he should not be afraid of bees is not going to work. Matthew, I see that you're having some big feelings about bees. What can we do? Because even it was getting to the point where I didn't know what to do, because I didn't want to go outside at all because there might be a bee. Like, not that he would even
the anticipation of it, totally.
That anxiety of like, oh my
that
God,
anxiety builds up.
there's the potential of a bee being outside. And so the poor thing, he was like, I don't want to go outside anymore again, ever. And so like, you can't do, oh boy, you gotta go outside. So like, we stop, we feel our feelings, and we pushing them down doesn't help. And we say, okay, do we see any bees? Okay, if there are any bees outside, what are we gonna do? What's our plan? What can we do? We can go inside, we can go tell mom, we can get out of the area. We spent some time understanding bees a little bit to try to overcome some of the fear factor, because he was especially afraid of the big, soft, queen bumblebee bees. But they don't sting you. They're not stingers. The big queen bees, and then
They're so scary looking. Yeah, exactly.
Because they're big bumblebee bees, but we didn't know anything really about them and why they were there and why they were so big and fat. And so we found out a little bit more. And then we found out about wasps, and those are the angry ones that can hurt you, and what the differences are and how we know the differences are. Now, in the end, is Matthew still afraid of bees? Of course he is. Like, it hasn't totally dissipated. But by acknowledging and not telling him not to be afraid, but saying, okay, let's understand why we're afraid. And even talking to him like, honey, have you ever been stung by a bee? Like, what is it about bees that it seems so scary? Is it the noise? I'm afraid that they're going to hurt me. Have you ever heard, like, and understand, well, even if a bee does sting you, what does that feel like? And will you have to, have your arm amputated? What happens? So not like but take.
I've used the arm amputated example as well.
Like, well, we have to cut your arm off, like, or, you get a bump and it hurts a little bit. Why does it hurt? And what, like, the more information for him was empowering, because it like really calmed down his anxiety. But again, I don't want anybody to get it twisted here. We're still afraid of bees. We still do not like bees. I don't know anybody who like is looking forward to getting stung by a bee, but at least he can go outside. And
it's the management of, right, again, it's helping your children help themselves in some ways, right, empower themselves, because you're right, like, there are very real fears, and you can take the bee example and you can extend it to a whole wide of things happening in our world right now, right, that are not going to go away. Like, there are real fears and anxieties, but helping our kids to manage those by empowering them with what they can do, the knowledge, the science. Like, even with Gabriel, he's really fascinated by why his body does certain things. And what I mean by that, right, is like, why do I feel like I'm good? Why do my hands start doing this when I get really, and I'm really thankful for that, because they actually say, like, to your point, you can't do it in the moment when the big emotion is happening, right? When that fear and anxiety is taking over, you can't get through, right?
You can't break through. Like,
you're in fight or flight. You're and there's a reason for that, right? Because your body's like, you must take right. Like, there's no rationalization. But overcoming that moment and then having that conversation helps for the very next time your kid starts to go into that, and they can sort of, the goal, right, is to help them to stop that, or at least feel like, oh, I'm going into this mode right now, or, oh, I know that this type of bee, or whatever it might be. And that is an extraordinarily powerful skill and habit that we need as adults, that our kids absolutely need. And we can do it at home. And quite frankly, it can happen, and schools should be doing this as well, and can be doing this as well.
And as we leave the segment, and Meryl, we're so grateful for this, and just being able to kind of think through this again. It's so applicable to this moment and the fears that so many of our kids are going through right now. We just had to have the conversation again. My kids are very nervous about Donald Trump, about what's happening in the streets, about, we went back from the day Donald Trump was elected. My kids were asking me if we have to leave, and if we were going to be in trouble because, we are who we are, like all of these things. Like, if we were going to, as I shared before, do we have to move to Mexico and we're not Mexican? We have relatives in Ecuador and they're going to send us to Mexico. Right. What are we going to, like, all of this fear? but by saying, I can understand we're all very anxious right now because we don't understand, but what can we do? How can we understand how we're feeling and take action? It's a teachable moment for our kids, but telling them don't feel your feelings, it's not, no, it does not. But Mira, thank you so much. Once again, preparedforsuccess.org is the website, preparedparents.org as well. So cool to have you with us this week.
You're saving my week.
We're gonna need this again. We'll be excited to check in with you next week as well, and sign up for the tips. It only takes about 5 seconds to do.
That's right.
So thanks for joining us.
Happy Wednesday. Bye.
Yes, a very happy Wednesday that we're having today because we have so many exciting guests.
We do.
And I'm just thrilled for our next guest who is joining us.
Here.
Manikka Bowman is our neighbor from Cambridge, Massachusetts. She's an extraordinary leader. She's a mama and has just been having some extraordinary, courageous conversations in education and with her community. And we're just very excited to have her with us to share her experience and her leadership with all of you this morning. Plus, look at her in her beautiful pink. We all needed this morning. Manikka, welcome. And girl, you have it together. I don't understand. You have a newborn. You have a baby girl, a toddler too. I mean, how are you pulling this off this morning? Let us in on the secret, girl.
Well, caffeine is really good, but probably bad. You shouldn't have too much of that right now since we're all in the house. And as you mentioned before, concealer always conceal things. That's why it's called concealer.
I love it. And I'm so grateful that you're with us to have a conversation this morning. But we try to be very real talk. We're all mamas here, moms and dads, and trying to figure this stuff out. None of us are doing it perfectly. But, before we do anything, we like to check in on your heart and your family and see how things are going. Like, it's been a long couple of months. Yeah. We know how things are over here in Somerville. How are things for you in your house? How have you been making it through?
Yeah, the struggle is real, as you stated earlier. I try to, just think about it from a big picture perspective. I'm in my house, all these houses in the Northeast, if you're living in the city, they're on the smaller end. So we're in this tiny house, all 4 of us with our newborn, and, it's challenging. I'm not going to lie about that, but I take a step back and I go back to this. Everyone in my house, we like each other. And at the end of the day, what more can you ask for at this point on the journey? Because, I know that there are situations with families that may not necessarily be the case, and it's, complicated. So I'm grateful that we have at least a balanced household as we manage the difficulties. And I appreciate Mira. I was writing down all the notes, because I grew up in the South, in Louisiana, and, thinking about big feelings is not how, the parents manage things. And so as I, think about how I want to parent my child, I take a step back too and think, okay, I may want to do things a little differently, no disrespect to my mom if she's watching. I love you, Mom. You did a great job. But it's a really real conversation. So we're doing okay. We're hanging in there.
And I think in this moment, when we first came into the quarantine and dealing with this, I think the thing that we were hearing from parents across the state and across the country was just real concern about the fabric of our family. There are things we can overcome. Like academically, we can catch folks up. We might be going through a recession and a depression. It's going to be hard, but we will rise up again. We will figure this stuff out. But if we damage the fabric of our families and our homes, and we don't understand where people are and how all of these different conditions can really break down the fabric of these families, that is when we do permanent damage to our communities. And so I think at the beginning, what we were trying to do with Massachusetts Parents United and with the National Parents Union is just get a lot of folks to focus on real life. Folks that are worried about having a job, if they lost a job, having to wait for 8 hours on the phone to file for unemployment, making sure that check actually comes because processing times were long, getting a stimulus check, losing your business, trying to fire for that PPP stuff. Everybody wanted us to focus on, distance learning. We call it emergency education because I don't know what that was, but that was not remote learning. That was just trying to figure something out.
I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Some band-aids on it. But, understanding that, even in the best of times, the struggle is real for many families. And this could really erode the fabric of families. So I know that you talk to so many families, you represent so many families. So how have you seen that play out?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we have every aspect of that spectrum that you just talked about. And you also have this cohort of individuals that, are really looking for at least our school district to provide them with particularly the academic aspect of it, for a lot of reasons. So you have, different cohorts of parents within our school district that you just really see value in that. And then you have the layer of like this historic disenfranchisement of certain cohorts of individuals within the school system. And then you have to manage people's fears, right? And so, you in regular times, as you spoke, educational outcomes and certain cohorts of families being able to get what they need from a school district was challenging in and of itself. You layer a pandemic on top of it, it creates a level of fear in parents that is, it's real. And you have to, for myself, I've had to respect that and figure out a way, how do you have multiple conversations at the same time? To ensure people that no matter where they're entering into this educational conversation, that at least our school district and myself as the vice chair of the school committee, we're going to hear you and we're going to try to figure it out. But the reality is no one actually knows what they're doing, because there's a big difference between taking in-person intimate experience like education in a classroom setting and putting it online. And you have a diversity of educators with different skill sets around technology that you can't control for the day you said, hey, we're leaving the classroom and we're not coming back.
Yeah, there is so much to unpack there. I want to start with one of the critical pieces, which I think we could discuss, even if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic and an uprising in the nation, which is the lack of engagement of parents. I want to start there. So many of us view ourselves as survivors of our public education experience. Like, we've been through it. I did an hour yesterday for Autism Sprinter talking about my story, and it's still very raw for me to tell it. Being a kid that was, coming out of a traumatic home situation, ending up, with DCF and ending up expelled out of public school. I felt like every adult around me had failed me. And so now, as a mama of 3 little boys, and having to put them in the system and sitting at the end of an IEP table, in kindergarten, where my kid had already been suspended 36 times. I come in with my dukes up. There has not been a lot of restorative justice when it comes to our communities, where schools that are mired by systemic racism have done harm to our communities, and there's been no acknowledgement of that. There's been no restorative justice, and then we're expected to come in and engage with the same system that did us such extraordinary trauma. So, when we start from there, they're constantly in the indictment of parents, like, parents don't show up, they don't do enough because we don't show up on the terms that they expect. And in a system that's based on white supremacy, a system that is based, on systemic racism, generational systemic racism, like, how do we move forward without acknowledgement of past harm so that we can start to restore this relationship? There's not even an acknowledgement of the harm done there.
Yeah. It's interesting for me with my educational journey in Louisiana. One would argue one of probably the worst educational systems, in the country. It's more factual, but I had this really unique experience because I grew up in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and most of my educators were Black. And our town was deeply segregated. I don't think that was a good thing. However, a good thing that came out of it was there was a lot of people that looked like me, that understood my struggle, and saw potential in me and elevated me. Now, the fact that it was a predominantly Black environment did not mean that there weren't some challenges along the way. There were challenges. You know, I grew up in public housing, and so class was very much an issue. And I felt that. I felt that in how my some of my friends and colleagues would engage me in a classroom setting, but it was always a few teachers that helped me move beyond those dynamics to see my potential. I also had a learning experience where I had an undiagnosed learning disability and didn't even have it formally documented until it was my last year of graduate school. So, you know, the struggle of having so much shame with even the ability to the nervousness of reading out loud when I was in like fifth grade, you know, and there's all these things that our families go through, right? Because of how a system is designed, that we don't see ourselves in these systems. And I think that is a part of the problem. And I compare how I grew up versus how I serve here in Cambridge. And it's something that I often struggle with because in a progressive environment, it's really different when everyone speaks the same language, right? No one has a problem with saying white supremacy. No one has a problem with saying disrupt the system, right? No one has a problem with saying Black Lives Matter, right? No one has a problem with saying the immigrant is welcome here, right? But when you translate that into a policy, when you translate that into how we engage families, you know, what time are we setting meetings for people to be there? Are we making sure that we have multiple languages that is welcome, you know, in these meetings? So no matter where you're at, if you know that you're in a very diverse district, that people can access it. Like that's a whole different conversation. And I think the difference between how I grew up and my educational experience and my ability to be able to survive and at some point thrive was because I had this bubble that I was in where people saw my value that wasn't necessarily wrapped up in a conversation about race every day. It was
Yeah,
about my educational attainment.
I think that is so critically important. And, you know, one of our friends and a part of the National Parents Union, Sharif El-Mekki and Mama El-Mekki, Aisha El-Mekki in Philadelphia, leading the Center for Black Educator Development, you know, has made our language and in our fight for diversity in educational leadership, you know, just so much more understandable and digestible for parents, because I think, you know, it didn't automatically translate for me that, you know, I knew that something was off. For instance, you know, sending my Miles into a classroom where he is the darkest kid in an almost all white classroom, and having, you know, no one to look for, even in the school. Like I remember going to one of his assemblies and saying, God, there is not even one Latino, let alone a Black woman, like leading any piece of his educational experience. And when they don't see themselves reflected, you know, in classroom leadership, they don't dream big. They don't see themselves as leaders. And that's why, you know, it's been critically important. You know, my dear friend Marielle Novas, who is part of the Ed Trust, who's a good friend of my Miley, she just got her doctorate at Harvard, and you know, he looks to her, and it was just it was transformational to see him turn to me and say, "Mommy, when I get my doctorate, it's not going to be like Marielle because we're going to have a lot more pizza at my party." But he knows that it's possible for him to go to Harvard and get, because he sees himself reflected in her. And I think, you know, that we rob our kids of that, and not just our children of color, but, you know, if the first time you're introduced to Black and brown excellence is when you're in college, the cake is already baked for life. We are perpetuating another cycle of racism. Like, we wonder why this continues to happen. Like, Black and brown excellence has to be introduced from the very beginning of their
Yeah, and I'll tell you a story about when I was in graduate school. So in addition to like all the many hats I wear, I'm also a clergy woman, ordained in the AME Church, but I went to a predominantly white seminary, and I ended up doing this urban mission trip. And I don't really like the term mission, but that's a conversation for another day. But I did this mission trip with one of my colleagues and friends. I was the only Black person in the group, and it was with junior high school kids, and they were going into an urban environment. You know what the code word for urban is, right? Black and Hispanic kids. Yes. And so they went and, went into these communities, and they were, doing mission work and serving and painting buildings and, reading to kids. And I had this moment, I'm like, these young people at a very young age is starting to understand that the way they're supposed to view Black and brown people is through serving them, not by engaging them as equals. Mm-hmm. And when I had that moment, I was like, yeah, this is a problem. And this is how entrenched systematic racism is, right? Is that we're teaching this through these small acts. And I often say small acts become really big problems if we don't learn how to tackle things in the moment. But, we are teaching young people how to view each other at a very young age, and that has a deep impact on academic outcomes. And I really push within our school district, even how we have conversations about data, how we have a conversation about Black and Hispanic students. It can't always be from the place of which we're failing them. We have to be able to balance these conversations in a way that honor their potential as well.
That is, and it's the deficit mindset.
It is the deficit mindset.
It cripples our kids. And, what's been extraordinary, it's been a challenge, the COVID-19, but it's also been an opportunity for parents as now the curators of curriculum that we are introducing our children to really flip the script. And if we agree with how curriculum is being presented, we've been spending a lot of time here exploring how we change that and learning that, we don't have to teach Black history from slavery onwards. We can start from the moment in Black history where Black people were kings and queens.
Yeah.
It's a difficult moment in the history of Black people, but they are not, less than, and, and even in the Latino community too, we have so many leaders and so many folks to look towards, and starting from, oh gosh, we're migrant farm workers, and
absolutely.
Like that's not where we start from, and being able to have them embrace, and again, the white saviorism that we see is what really cripples even our school system now. I mean, you see it, the belief gap is very real. Even those who are very, very well-intentioned coming in and saying, well, what do you want us to do with these kids? They're not capable of proficiency. They're too poor. Just because you're poor, Black and brown doesn't mean you're stupid. It means that you have talent is, again, so many people saying talent is equitably distributed, opportunity is not.
Absolutely.
And saying these kids are not deserving of opportunity, we lose so much. And it's really changing that mindset. And that's what worries me as a mama. Do you look at my babies and say, these are kids that, brown kids just aren't going to get so far at math. Brown kids are only going to get so far at me. If you don't even fundamentally believe, you're not going to challenge my kid, and you're not going to see,
absolutely. It plays out in the action that person then takes towards your child, and that classroom engagement is where the disruption needs to happen. And it's one of the biggest challenges that I have had since I've been here, doing the work in such a progressive city. Sometimes I say, man, this is harder than the work or living in Louisiana or Texas. I felt like there it was very distinct, and you just knew where the lines were. Yeah. And I feel like here it's way more nuanced. And how do you push people that are woke around their beliefs in a way that's going to have an impact on academic outcomes? That is the challenge.
Here we call it progressivism.
Oh.
They can speak for people of color. Like girl, I'm just going to say, you don't have to say it, but in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I cannot imagine what it is like being a Black woman leading a school committee of folks that think they know and are slinging around a lot of language. But you know, the actions behind it are the microaggressions that must come along.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to lead, and I'm really grateful for the people that send me back. But it is interesting. I do have moments because like I'm literally a person that had a learning challenge that wasn't diagnosed until like my last year of graduate school. I grew up in public housing. I pretty much paid for myself to go to school, and I'm still paying on those loans. Let's be very clear about it, you know, and some type of way from that place, you know, I live in Cambridge, and I don't say this as like a badge of honor or anything, but to go from living in public housing to be able to own a home in Cambridge is significant.
Yeah, and Manikka, I gotta say, like yeah, I don't need to tell you this, but I want to say it for the benefit of the million folks we reach every week here. To be a Black girl with a learning difficulty, those are the girls we push out and we lose. Those are the girls we give up on. Those are the girls that end up in the disciplinary process, that end
Absolutely.
up in the prison pipeline. Like your existence is a triumph, you know, and your grit to continue to engage in this. That is what's so heartbreaking, is that, you know, so many folks, like after being ground into hamburger by this system,
Yeah.
are just saying, you know what? Thank God I survived it. I'm done. I'm going to go. It's a triumph that I exist in this world and I am successful. I'm going to spend my time, living my life and engaged with people who appreciate me, not doing the hard work of disruption and having to really push, you know, even in progressive circles, these conversations. So I have a million questions I want to ask you, but I got to stop here and just say, there is so much on your shoulders right now. You know, on a regular basis, just being a Black woman in America, period, doing this disruptive work, and then doing it in this moment as a brand new mama, again, a newborn, and mamas are reborn every time we have, you know, another.
They are.
You know, going through that recovery, going all of that with COVID-19, and then being in this moment of extreme trauma. Like, I don't want to speak for you. I want to hear how you are and what I can do to support you, but you must be exhausted.
Yeah, so I gave birth in February, and I call it was right before the world fell apart, right? And so we were fortunate to be able to get into the hospital before they started putting these very reactionary measures in place to say your partner couldn't go in there. God bless all the mothers and fathers and partners out there that were not able to be present for their birth. Like that weighs on me so much. But we got into the system before then. And I think the challenge was the aftercare. And so I was put in these really, just difficult positions where, I had a C-section, and with C-section recoveries are hard. There's no way to get around that.
Over here, I get it.
Bless you. You are a saint. You are a saint. And when it was time for me to do my 6-week checkup, because they were still reorganizing the healthcare system, I was told that my appointment needs to be canceled. Normally my provider is literally like 3 miles away. I needed to do an in-person, it would have been in Burlington, which is like 15 miles away from the house, but they really pushed for me to do it via a phone call, not even, telemedicine. And I was just in this place where I'm like, okay, I know the health outcomes for Black women, and the amount of fear I had in that moment, I'm like, okay, either I can keep it safe and center my family's needs, or I can go into this, clinic, and do my 6-week and put myself at risk. Like those were the conversations that moms were having, during this time at the height of the cases when before the curve was flattened. Well, at least here it's flattened, other places not so much. So it's been a journey, and I did that, and 3 weeks later I was back at it doing school committee work because our school systems were being impacted by COVID. And as vice chair of the school committee, I was on the bargaining committee for our school district. And just, there was responsibilities that maybe I could have stepped away from, but it was important for me to figure out a way to continue them on, because the certain things had to take place, by law. You just have to do certain things like pass a budget. So it's been a journey. And I think that it has taught me, as I continue to think about public life, that there needs to be more protections in place and supports in place for women particularly, and mothers, and having to make these types of decisions as it relates to how to be present, should not be such a hard burden on a woman if she's an elected official and going through the birthing process and postpartum process.
Because the perspective of mothers and women are critically important to this work, and I think it's extraordinarily valuable. Like, that's what our organizations are based on, is we believe in the power of mothers, of women, the backbones of our community, the organizers, the leaders, the heart. And we need strong women. We need strong Black women in particular. And so all I can say is you're inspiring, in this.
Oh.
We love you and what we can do to strengthen you and your backbone and make this work possible, because we need your perspective. We're here for it. So
one thing I would add, and particularly for this network, one positive thing that has come out of COVID is the ability to go to a public meeting virtually. It's something that I was trying to advocate for so hard before the pandemic hit, and something that was so difficult before, boom, just like that, it happened. And it has had a dramatic impact on who shows up for public comment at our school committee hearing. So, as the world gets back to whatever normal would be, I just think from a policy perspective, particularly with parents, the ability to be present is so much greater by using this digital platform. So, for folks across the country, if your local jurisdictions and municipal government agencies has moved to this, try to hold on to it, advocate for it to be the new standard and the new norm, because it has made a significant difference. And even my ability as an elected official to be present, as well as parents to be a part of important conversations.
I don't know. Yeah, I would suspect that's going to be a fight, because folks actually don't want to hear from us. I suspect that they don't want to hear our voices. What we ask for and what we challenge is very difficult, but
Yes.
that's that another day. All right, Madam Vice Chair, I got one last question for you. I'm going to take my shot. I'm going to shoot my shot while I got you. Cambridge, what are we doing with school next year? Are we going to have a hybrid model? Are we going remote? What's the deal? Let's see. What is it?
The meat of it all. Yeah. So we're still having conversations. No decisions have been finalized yet, but what we are looking at, we are looking at the hybrid models. And so we're looking at models where we have students back in the schools. So we will have young people back in our schools in some shape, form, or fashion. That said, it will not look the same as before. We're thinking about staggered start times. We're thinking about maybe certain grades, being able to attend schools in buildings versus, some students being able to stay at home, because the ability to have independent learning is greater if you are, a high school student versus, a kindergartner. I have a kindergartner. Let's be clear, I was the teacher. I should have the Teacher of the Year award, like me. And every other parent. So like really thinking about that as it relates to like who can be back in our buildings, because, it's an urban environment, space is an issue. So those are the things that we're thinking about. We're also thinking about, if we have a surge in cases again, going back to remote learning. But recently, I, as well as all of my colleagues, agreed on this motion to do a review of our virtual learning, because we thought that having a combination of real-time videos like we're having versus pre-recorded would really tackle some of those gaps, because we know first responders, ability to be able to support their kids wasn't there. So having pre-recorded videos was really an equity issue. So we want to know, who, how in our district, how they were able to implement that, learn, and then going into our next wave, which because of our national leadership, 9 times out of 10, it will happen, unfortunately, that we are prepared in a way that will create a bit more equity, because, honestly, it was just people were thrown in the fire. And I want to appreciate the educators that were able to step up. But, it was really, really, really hard. But if we don't take the time to step back and look at the data and understand where we did well and where we missed the mark, we're not going to be able to handle this in the fall when we have to go back to remote learning and be able to support our parents. So, it's just really up in the air still, but the goal is to have students back in buildings. It's just, I think all of us need to reconcile or grieve, or whatever language we want to use, that there will be a new normal until we have medical interventions when it comes to COVID-19, and we have to adjust our lives and start preparing our kids to be able to manage that as we go back into schools.
Well, Manikka, I gotta say, we have put together our NPU Parent Bill of Rights, bringing together 17 communities across Massachusetts. This was actually created through a collaborative process of parent organizations across the country, which we think have some pretty good recommendations around building an equity-infused educational recovery. Making sure that, if it's going to be 10 kids in the classroom, how we determine who those kids are and how we keep them healthy and safe, because we think, I don't have to say this to you, but I'm going to say it to everybody, Black and brown children are just as valuable and deserve to be healthy and safe, just like our folks in Wellesley. So unless we're sure that they're healthy, that they're safe, that we have done the work that is necessary to make sure that they can re-enter public buildings without having a fear of contracting COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Or, notification for parents. If you can tell us that, when kids have lice and strep throat, you got to tell us when our kids could be potentially impacted by COVID-19. A lot of great recommendations there. But parents,
I'll take a look at those. And I know one thing that I've been really pushing hard when we think about who goes back to the buildings versus like who says, you know what, I'm going to just homeschool my child. There's like equity issues wrapped up in that. And particularly here in Cambridge, where we have, it's just such a starch line, the middle class here in Cambridge is really shrinking. And so even as we have conversations around who enters our buildings again, and who decides to opt out and who's holding their kids back as it relates to, really being able to take advantage of, educational opportunities because they want their kids to be prepared. All of those conversations have to be framed from the place of equity as we put policies forward. So I'll definitely take a look at what this network is recommending.
I'm really hopeful about that, because I'll tell you, we have 5 parents on the return to school working group for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And when our 5 parents demanded that the conversation be based in equity, we were told that equity has no place in this conversation.
Oh, wait a minute now. Really?
Which we said, Commissioner Riley, how would you like us to shut down Malden Center? Would you prefer a traffic jam? Because this conversation will be based in equity.
Absolutely, it has to be.
Yeah. So tough conversations happening there with DESE, but I know that you are going to be fighting there to make sure that in Cambridge these conversations take place in that place, and we know you're fighting for us. So Manikka, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Thank you for the conversation. We appreciate you and your leadership, and keep going.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Manikka Bowman joining us from Cambridge, Massachusetts. She's the vice chair of the Cambridge School Committee. Sorry, I went over again. Oh, yeah.
What else is new?
I'm chatty, and Manikka is so inspirational.
There's a great segment
so
in a really interesting city. Cambridge is pretty unique.
Yes, all that brain power, but sometimes can't fight their way out of a paper bag over there. They need Manikka's direction to help them get out of their own way.
I was a travel agent once in Cambridge, They need lots of direction. Right in Harvard Square.
Oh boy.
Ooh, yikes,
Oh, my
yikes.
goodness.
They can launch a rocket to the moon. Can't tie luggage tag. Just saying. Nothing personal. Nothing personal.
Anyway, thank you so much for being with us for a lively conversation this morning. Glad to have so many folks joining us as you do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday
That's
this
right.
summer. We'll be back again on Friday for another conversation here with the National Parents Union.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.